Why did a young girl see the betrayal and murder of her family as the ultimate act of self-discovery? How did a delusional fantasy life, complete with werewolves and vampires, serve as a psychological vehicle for violence? What does it reveal when the core psychological drive of the crime is the complete final elimination of parental authority? Welcome. I'm a licensed professional counselor, and I don't just talk about the crimes. I talk about the psychology behind the crimes and the mysteries that captivate us. We look behind the facts of the case to understand the why of the crime. Subscribe and like this video if you want to learn more about the mental health and psychological indicators of true crime cases like this one. Today we're analyzing the case of Jasmine Richardson, the youngest person in Canadian history to be convicted of a triple homicide. It will focus entirely on the mental health indicators of the perpetrator, and I must emphasize that my analysis here is purely for educational purposes, and it's based on publicly available court records. These are my professional speculations, not a formal diagnosis of the individuals involved. This case involves violence of a family. Viewer discretion is advised. The crime unfolded in Medicine Hat, Alberta, Canada in 2006. It's a profound study in the destructive power of untreated mental health issues, the vulnerability of the adolescent brain, and the influence of a toxic symbiotic relationship. The path to this unthinkable act began long before the night of the crime, rooted in documented troubling psychological behaviors. The most compelling and arguably the most crucial piece of psychological puzzle comes from court records detailing Jasmine Richardson's behavioral history. Before the murders of her parents, Mark and Deborah, and her younger brother Jacob, she had already received two significant diagnoses: oppositional defiant disorder and conduct disorder. These are not minor childhood behaviors. ODD involves a pattern of hostile, disobedient, and defiant behavior toward authority figures. ODD is more severe, repetitive, and persistent pattern of behavior in which the basic rights of others or major age-appropriate societal norms or rules are violated. Her behavior had been reportedly deteriorating in the months leading up to the crime. She was frequently violating the school dress code, unauthorized Gothic attire that was clearly a statement of defiance. Her online life, which was heavily scrutinized after the crime, became a vehicle for her psychological acting out. She falsified her age on sites like MySpace, posted inappropriate photos, and used her online persona to directly challenge the constraints of her reality. This digital deception and persistent rule breaking are concrete manifestations of the diagnosis of ODD and CD. The defiance was escalating, and her parents were losing control. How does a person go from rule breaking to murder? That's the psychological gap we have to address. Another disturbing indicator was her relationship with her 8-year-old brother Jacob. According to her much older boyfriend, Jeremy, he once witnessed Jasmine strangling Jacob. She also reportedly expressed embarrassment about Jacob needing to accompany her to family events. She's her brother. Why wouldn't he go? This behavior is highly symptomatic of the conduct disorder diagnosis. The act of strangling a sibling, even if it's not carried out to completion, demonstrates a severe breakdown in empathy and impulse control. For a child with CD, her brother's existence became another barrier to her desired independence and lifestyle. The murder of Jacob, which she participated in, was not a means to an end. It was an act of personal profound destruction, a perceived impediment. Jasmine was deeply immersed in the Gothic vampire subculture, a world that offered an extreme identity outside the restrictive environment her parents were attempting to enforce. This is where the psychological lure of Jeremy, her boyfriend, comes into focus. At 23, Jeremy was an adult who claimed to be a 300-year-old werewolf. For a 12-year-old girl struggling with identity and feeling oppressed, this fantasy was intoxicating. It was an escape, and more importantly, it was a profound act of rebellion. She was seeking an extreme transgressive identity, and Jeremy was the catalyst. Their shared online dynamic was not just a role play, it was a rehearsal for a destructive reality. The relationship between Jasmine and Jeremy was the direct engine for this horrific crime. Our psychological analysis must focus on the mutually reinforcing pathologies here. Jeremy's mental health indicators were antisocial traits and escapism. Jeremy had his own documented mental health struggles, including a diagnosis of ADHD and a history of substance abuse that began at age 14. He indulged in alcohol and various drugs and had a history of self-harm. His werewolf persona was a form of extreme escapism, a withdrawal from a troubled reality, and a manipulative tool to attract and control vulnerable individuals like Jasmine. While only a formal psychological evaluation could confirm, his actions show several key traits associated with antisocial personality disorder and psychopathic traits, though not necessarily a full psychopath diagnosis. It's on the spectrum. This includes deception, which served as a mask, callousness, a lack of empathy, the ease in which he carried out their murders, and especially the overkill of the father, Mark, who was stabbed 24 times, and superficial charm and grandiosity, the exaggerated self-image of a 300-year-old creature. He used Jasmine's vulnerability and her defiance against her parents for his own gratification and twisted fantasy. He became her willing instrument of destruction. The psychological motive? The core motivation for this crime was the elimination of control. Jasmine's parents strictly objected to the relationship with the 23-year-old Jeremy, her being grounded. Their relationship was not just forbidden romance, it was the ultimate act of defiance for Jasmine. In her mind, her parents were the absolute impediment to her freedom, her identity, and her love. The psychological jump from "I wish they were gone" to "we must kill them" is a critical psychological leap fueled by the unchecked symptoms of her conduct disorder and encouragement of a predatory adult. It was an ultimate act of psychological autonomy. The elimination of her parents was an attempt to clear the path to her desired transgressive life. Jeremy. The planning and execution of the murders provide crucial behavioral clues that complete the psychological picture. The entire crime was meticulously planned, with Jasmine providing floor plans and detailed timeline of her family's whereabouts. She reportedly said the murder was her way to prove her love to Jeremy. This level of premeditation, especially in a 12-year-old, highlights a profound level of calculation and deception at play. The act was not a crime of passion. It was an act of cold, calculated elimination. This aligns strongly with the most severe indicators of conduct disorder, which often predicts future antisocial behavior. The act of providing the floor plans, a practical step in a horrific plan, shows a chilling psychological detachment from the victims. After the murders, the two perpetrators fled, but their behavior was extraordinarily detached. This behavioral clue is a psychological tipping point. The ability to engage in normal, even intimate acts immediately following the triple murder reveals a profound psychological abnormality. For Jasmine, the murders did not provoke horror or regret. They produced a warped sense of excitement and bonding. She later admitted to investigators that she had hoped the act would bring us closer together. This statement reveals the perverse logic of her damaged psychology. The murders were not just a tragedy, but the catalyst for the ultimate union of her and Jeremy. This is a powerful indicator of an extreme lack of remorse and a deeply entrenched psychopathic trait. The natural-born killer's viewing is particularly telling, suggesting a romanticism of transgressive violence, a common theme in those struggling with identity and control issues. The murder of her 8-year-old brother, Jacob, is the most psychological disturbing element. Jasmine stabbed him once before Jeremy slit his throat. Her participation in the murder of her brother underscores the complete collapse of her emotional and moral compass. The act of stabbing him was a final, horrifying commitment to her new destructive identity. It was the ultimate betrayal and move that ensured there was no turning back to her family life. Psychologically, this act was a severing of the final tie to her childhood and the world her parents represented. The crime was not solely a result of forbidden romance. It was the perfect storm of a deeply disturbed, defiant adolescent with untreated, severe mental health issues, driven by a toxic desire for control, and manipulated by an older individual with strong antisocial and psychopathic traits. The why of the crime is the complete pathological elimination of the one barrier, her family, standing between her and the extreme destructive identity she was seeking. The behavioral clues from the early signs of ODD and CD to the calculated planning and the profound post-crime detachment all piece together the picture of a young psyche veering into darkness. The story of Jasmine Richardson is a case about the importance of early intervention for severe mental health issues in youth and the destructive consequences when defiance is allowed to calcify into depravity. Jasmine was only a young adolescent. She wasn't even a teenager yet. And she was dating a 23-year-old. Why would an adult be dating a preteen? If I were her parents, I would act and behave the same way. But unfortunately, this story ends in tragedy. Tell me what you think about this case in the comments below. And if you want more mental health analysis of true crime stories like this one, be sure to subscribe for more cases. And if you found this case compelling, be sure to watch my next story. It will make you more aware of your surroundings. Thank you for joining me today. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe.